Well, good morning, everybody. So here's the plan for today's forecast video. I want to do a quick review again about Milton, and I want to walk into some of the bigger risk kind of factors across the rest of the United States for the next 7 to 10 days. I'm still watching for something to shift around about a week from now, and that may be just the beginning, but I don't want to put too much hope in what I'm trying to share. Then I'm going to stretch out longer range again. We're going to get out there pretty far into the forecast, and I'm going to just put out a couple of caveats to this very La Niña-like long-range forecast that's out there. And I just want to let you know, too, that I am working on some new subseasonal weather forecast models. I do have a week off from travel next week, and I'm going to put a lot of effort into it just to see if I can get a few things going for you. So just kind of keeping you posted on some things here. Okay, so the map you've been staring at here, last 72 hours of total accumulated precip. Again, it's just another look down here in Florida at that incredibly heavy rainfall stripe. Very interesting way that this hurricane's heaviest rains were on its northern side, much lighter on the south. We still have about 2.5 million people in Florida without power, and I wanted to show you just a map that looked at the maximum winds that came through. Now, this is using a data set called RTMA, and you can see my color bar along the bottom. Now, this is using an old mapping system. I just haven't revamped this code just yet, but it still makes a usable map here. So just understand anything over 100 is given this lightest shade. So of course, in through here, we're well over that. But the point is just to show you we had a pretty far to the north extent here of 50 to 60 mile an hour winds. Same thing for the south. And we carried winds, as you can see in the color bar down here, that were hurricane force pretty far through Florida. So this was incredibly damaging. And we just continue to watch, as more and more information comes in about how much was destroyed. I believe the combination between, Milton and Helene, in terms of total costs, will likely be north of $300 billion when it's all said and done. So we'll continue to watch this. The tolls on lives and families. That's never something I can just tell in a video, but that is certainly a major impact from these last two hurricanes. Now, speaking of winds, the winds I'm going to be focusing on going forward are these. You're watching the water vapor in the upper levels of the atmosphere trace out the flow. That's one of the coolest things about water vapor, is that when we use the imagery to kind of watch it, because it's such a transient gas in the atmosphere, we can see how the atmospheric flow is pushing it around. And these will become maps that we're going to look at all the time in winter, simply because we're looking for the big pushes of moisture, especially into the West Coast. Now, what I'm watching for is what we've been discussing for weeks. See where the lows are beginning? See where they're ending up. Okay, see that? There's another one coming in here, and that's going to go into the Gulf of Alaska. That has been the pattern that has been on repeat. This is what's kept the Southwest under large ridges that have at times pushed all the way into the central United States, which has kept it exceptionally hot in the Southwest, very warm throughout the plains, other than these occasional brief cool downs. And it's what's also, by dipping troughs in here, allowed the eastern side of the United States to dip into their cold air at times. And we have widespread frost and freeze advisories out on the far eastern side of the Ohio River Valley, getting into parts of Virginia, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, New York, and parts of the Northeast. And again, this is just looking here at, it's kind of the reflection, right? So the troughs are way over here, the ridge opens up, stuff comes around the backside and drops in. Now, I'm going to let you know that the forecast for frost over the next 7 days continues to extend farther and farther to the south. And this is the newest map. We're going to come back to this again when I get toward the kind of the second half of this forecast video, talking about the temperatures. But just want to show you that this is what the frost potential looks like as we just stretch this forward. And we have this event coming in early next week that's going to drop these temperatures down. The issue, though, is that event's not going to be enough this weekend into early next week to knock out these precipitation maps. So this is the last 7 days as a percent of normal. And I mean, while we can zoom in here and just have a close look at the southeast, which of course has got, these totals here are just off the charts, 1,200 to 1,500%. They're getting like 2 months worth of rainfall out of Milton here. We look 14 days, and honestly, it was Milton and then Helene that gave us most of our precipitation signal across the whole of the U.S., save some moisture that got into parts of the Northeast and the storms that came through, what was that, last Friday, right here into parts of Iowa and Illinois. We've just not had much at all. Last 30 days looks something like this. We just continue to think through these statistics and watch this drought expand in the middle part of the country. Here's your latest update on the September through the first 10 days of October, looking at precipitation ranks, and more 131s and 132s continue to emerge here. And given that we have a forecast that remains so dry in the next 7+ days, this area is just going to continue to get deeper and deeper into drought. Our soil moisture levels continue to stay extremely low, and as I presented to you about a week ago, I'm worried that if this isn't undone throughout this upcoming fall and winter, that we're going to get into spring having very low subsurface soil moisture, relying on heavy rains in spring to break a drought situation again. And when that happened this year and we broke the drought in this area, we ended up having so much rain that we flooded out and delayed planting. So this is going to put us in a pretty delicate balance going forward. What's interesting is how dry it's been here. The reflection on the drought monitor continues to be slow, and I think that is by design of the drought monitor. But as you see here, we have about 75% of the lower 48 in some form of drought. That includes the abnormally dry color, which is this color in through here. We have about 39% that is in D1 to D4. But it's the change map that I think is worth looking at. So let's go here and go to change maps. Oops, sorry. There's change maps. And over the last week, you can see all the areas that have had a degradation in the drought. And if I show you the last 4 weeks, there you go. So we can see there's several areas in here that have had a 2-class to 3-class degradation in the drought, while the tropical systems that continue to hit the southeast have wiped out drought issues in that area. So thinking this through, we come back to our next 7 days forecast. And we do have a system, we've talked about it all week, that sweeps through the Great Lakes, gets into the northeast. Best chances of rain are in the northeast out of this. Behind that system is much colder air. We then know that about a week from now, we have a front coming into the west. And I'll show you the timing of that and the chances for precipitation that brings. But overall, if you just want to compare that map to normal, I'm going to switch models. This is the WPC. I have yet to make the WPC anomaly map. I'll make it soon. This is the high-resolution European, and it's the 7-day precipitation anomaly graphic, which is very similar. So even with that moisture coming through the Great Lakes, it's still technically not wetter than average, except for in a couple of places. You can see pockets in the northeast, but very dry into this section of the Mid-South down towards the lower Mississippi River Valley over toward the Red River Valley and into Texas. That seems to be our driest corridor compared to average. So I want to think this through and just ask where this might be going, because about a week from now, I see this. So let me take you back and show you how we get there. You see, for so long, we just have watched deep troughs. That's why we looked at the water vapor imagery a moment ago, just digging into the Gulf of Alaska and ridges opening. We know that there's a wave break coming. Talked about it all week. This will be by Monday. That'll help drive this trough deeper into the northeast and through the Great Lakes. It's going to be a bit of a precip maker in this area, but on the backside, a lot of high pressure and some much colder air diving in. We'll look at that again in a few moments. What is interesting is that when we get out there, this is next Wednesday, Thursday, into Thursday night, for example, we start to see something we've not seen in a while. Okay, there's a ridge that's here. And the pattern seems to get a bit stacked up just for a moment, where there's a high over low in the Bering Sea and then into the North Pacific. And I think because of that wave break event, we're finally able to disrupt and push things forward, and we get troughing here. And what's interesting is this is the 7-day forecast from the artificial intelligence. This is the 7-day forecast from the European, the 7-day forecast from the GFS ensemble, the 7-day forecast from the GFS operational, the 7-day forecast from the European ensemble. And all of them continue to show kind of what the AI is showing, is that this is here. Now, why do we think about this? Well, just remember, when the flow comes through the country like this, cold air, all right, surface high pressure will sit right here. That opens up the Gulf of Mexico to start to transport moisture. We drop the heights behind this. Now, what does that mean? That means you get lift in the atmosphere, and that starts to bring in better chances of moisture in an area that is very dry. Now, I want to be very clear, just very clear about this, because we're going to be talking about it. We've been talking about it all this week. I'll be talking about it most of next week, because this is all the way out there on Thursday. And I don't want you to think that what I'm about to forecast is going to break this drought. What I'm forecasting is just the first signs of rain in an area that's not measured rain in a very, very long time. Because after this is day 7 in the forecast, the trough comes through. Do we have anything supporting behind it? Yeah, look, this is not what we've had. We've not had ridges in this area. the jet stream here is starting to get really blocky in its look. Now, it's not been that way. We've had lows here that have come into this area, right? But now we start to see this third week of October maybe giving us a more favorable look at trying to get some of this in here. Are we just getting a bit more amplified in the pattern? I think we possibly are. So I guess maybe the thought process here is that what I'm showing you a week from now could be the beginning of a pattern break, but it is not going to be just putting an end to all of our drought concerns in the midsection of the United States. But I just want to point this out while we're on this idea here. All of the week 2 forecasts have now trended to what the AI picked up first. Now, I don't think the AI was exact in what was going to happen. I'm just saying the AI found a pattern earlier, a day or two earlier, which is what I'm trying to take advantage of it doing. But now you see GFS, AI, European Ensemble, and the CPC all in that week 2 time frame, starting to show better chances of that central U.S. opening of moisture as the ridge builds, the surface high pressure builds over the mid-Atlantic. Okay, that's part of this story. Now, we are expecting as this whole system comes through for there to be some changes. For example, we're going to be watching for some stronger winds. Just taking a very quick look. When that comes through, not Monday, Tuesday, here it is, Wednesday, Thursday, watch the central plains of the United States get really windy out ahead of our chances for rain. So I want to make sure that we understand that there's going to be a pretty tight pressure gradient associated with this. Now to flip back to the European model, which is the one we were kind of sticking with here, let's just play this forward. Here is Saturday into Sunday. That's when the front sweeps through. The trough becomes established. More rain for southern Florida. Front coming in here to the Pacific Northwest. That's when the low curls up. High pressure builds on the backside. We talked a bit about the snow yesterday. You can go to agweather.com and see all the latest snow maps. But as we play this forward, you can see that low curling there and these chances for snow, possibly at very high elevation here. There's the high pressure cell that sinks in behind it, driving in some of that colder air, clearing things out, strong radiational cooling in the lower atmosphere, frost event. We'll take a look at the extent again in a few moments. So that's only 114 hours out. The western trough is here. See it? There it is next Wednesday. Look at that front coming into the west. Next Thursday. And this is when I'm expecting very windy conditions in the central United States. So late next week. And then you're going to see this low form, and that's what brings in the precip. Now with that low, there is snow in the Rocky Mountains. We saw that in yesterday's forecast. We'll take a look next week to get a little bit better sense on the totals. But do you see what I'm talking about? Where's the high pressure? Here. How did that open up the Gulf? Well, the wind flow around a high pressure cell is always clockwise in the northern hemisphere. So the low dipped in, made its way up toward Canada, just following the jet stream flow. And as a result, we're just going to open up a chance for rain. But I just want to be very clear here. That's all this is. This isn't the saving rain. I'm just going to say it again. It's going to be the beginning, I think, of a bit of a pattern shift overall. But to show you that models have bought into this is the European Ensemble. Next 5 days, who's under a half inch? That's here. So what do we have? We've got this. Okay? We have the beginning of the front coming into the west. Now watch. As I add on more time, this is getting us out there 10 days from now. Where did you see the drop? Well, the front came in, snow comes into the mountains, we open up the Gulf, the ridge sits here, right in between. That's now where the chance of staying under a half inch has gone away. So that's what we're watching for right there. And while I'm on this site, let's go over here and look at the precipitation probabilities for winter. There it is. Let's just ask who's got a chance for some snow. Now, new model run just came in. Let's go back to the old one. And let's take it out there 10 days. How about right here? So again, the European model, chances for snow at high elevation, interior of the Northeast, parts of Ontario and Quebec. Then you see here down the spine of the Rockies, some in the Sierras, some in the Cascades. So that just kind of completes that story on the snow. I do need to let you know that we're still watching an active bit in the tropics, and some of the forecast models are doing something I don't often see in October, which is to take an African easterly wave from the Cape Verde Islands and pulling them toward this area. Again, what is the map? It's the probability of a tropical depression forming. So this isn't saying, oh, a big hurricane. It's just saying the chance of a tropical depression forming is there. And we still are monitoring our kind of Caribbean, Central American gyre effect, which could last. Given these ocean temperatures, I think our hurricane season doesn't have its typical cutoff date of November 1. I think it could go into the first couple of weeks of November. All right, from here, where are we going to go? Let's talk next about temperatures and maybe where this pattern could end up. One of the reasons why I think that the tropical season has more time to it, is because the MJO is trying to slide over into phase 5 and 6, and we start to see some better rising motion here again in late October. So while we could go a little quieter for the next 10 plus days, I don't think we're done, and there's not a whole lot of suppression here to shut this whole thing down. So I just wanted to be clear on that as to why I was saying there's some substance to this map. All right, now let's talk about those temperatures. Here's Friday morning's lows. We have the frost event, the freeze warnings that were in this area. We know there's a lot of heat in the central U.S. behind this. Still very warm throughout the west for these overnight lows. But here comes the cold front Sunday into Monday. See the white line? That's my frost line. We get in there to Tuesday. Here it is. And Wednesday, the cooler air advances toward the south and east. We will have lows down here along the Gulf Coast that will be colder than Montana on Wednesday. And there's Thursday. That's all low temperatures. On the high temperature side of it, hot. Look at the heat that we're going to have in the Central Plains today. This is very short-lived. That's Friday into Saturday. By the time we get into Sunday, here's the colder air. It's already in the northeast. Cool down beginning in the Central Valley of California. That's Monday. Tuesday, we're going to watch the front come into the west. Ready? Bringing the temperatures down, pushing the heat out ahead of it while the colder air exits to the east. And Thursday, next Thursday, this is when the trough is in the west. We've opened up this to strong southerly winds, but the Gulf moisture is going to try to make a return here. I'll look more closely at that next week, and that will be the preceding warm-up and moistening up of the atmosphere that is needed to get this next system to make some rain. But again, I'm just remember, it's some rain. It's not inches and inches and inches of rain, okay? On the temperature side, kind of stretching it out, next 5 days still looks like this. Day 5 through 10, day 10 through 15. Now, what's different? Day 10 through 15, it's this. This indicates that we're starting to reposition troughs more across the western side of North America. And if that continues, that's going to change the whole precipitation pattern into November as well. So that's what we'll be watching for. Can we keep that progression going? Because if it does, your 30-day sliding window of average precipitation anomalies starts to make the western U.S. wet and starts to make the central United States wet. This is as far out as I can go. That's October 26th through November 25th. And there is certainly something to be said with the North Pacific jet pushing farther toward the west coast, digging at times and leaving around what could be higher pressure here. So that's a wetter signal in this area and a wetter signal for the west. Now we look at all of this and start to just ask, like, what's it related to? Is it related to La Niña? Partly, only because we just tend to get a more variable Pacific jet out of it. I mean, not really yet though. I think there's more in common with this with some of the MJO progression, but I even can't make a strong story out of that just yet. I'm watching the progression and trying to let it feed my thought process going forward. But I brought up La Niña, so I want to give you the latest. This was released yesterday, the official NOAA forecast for October. Official NOAA INSO forecast issued in October. They brought their probabilities down, so we're now about 75% chance of having La Niña this winter. And what I'll be interested to see is, can we lose the effects of it fast? And what this will really boil down to is a question about the momentum of the atmosphere come next spring. Because generally speaking, when a La Niña builds all winter long, if it does, so this guy right here on these strong trade winds, we just keep losing the momentum in the Pacific jet. This is just the strength of the flow coming in this direction. And if that strength doesn't return, if we can't bring back in strong temperature contrast and we can't feed it with the heat and momentum from the convection that's usually here, then we get into our situation in summer that the jet stream just doesn't have what it takes. So what happens is the jet stream just tends to block more, and it likes to put a ridge here and a ridge there and another ridge somewhere out here. And in that case, the pattern allows itself to get stuck more because there's no momentum just to break through this and shove waves in. And that's what we're concerned about, long wave blocking, if La Niña's influence carries into next year. So, if we look at the ocean temperatures right now, are we in La Nina territory? Yeah, a lot of us consider a half degree below average to be down in La Nina territory. Some are 0.8, doesn't matter. We've got ocean temperatures that are down here. And the model forecasts are all over the place, to be honest with you. I show you this every once in a while. The Bureau of Meteorology, so that's Australia, Canada, the Europeans, the Japanese, the French, the US, the British, and everybody. And what's interesting is Australians are the least aggressive on forecasting this. The Japanese are the most. Into November, NOAA takes the lead with the Japanese following. The Australians' very weak forecast. December, that would be when we'd expect the peak of this La Nina. They use a minus 0.8 threshold. So, yeah, we're touching that, which would make this a weak La Nina. But they're all fading in January into February pretty quickly here. And that will be the question, how quickly does this thing fade? Now, given all of that, I just want to remind you of the forecast we covered this week. The European model, this one's annotated. October to December, precipitation is on the left. January through March is on the right. I apologize, I kind of let this line bleed over into this image, but you get the sense of what's going on here. We are just tending to see October's dryness continue. That's what biased a lot of this forecast. But November, I'm expecting a flip-flop, both here and here. By the time we get January to March, this particular graphic, it's not just the forecast from the European, it's also in the NMME. See it? I mean, there's January through March. Very similar forecasts in the precipitation patterns between these two models. November to January, start to see the fading here, but it's just to say that every long-range model we've got right now is La Nina-ish. And I'm just going to make a case to say that if we have a weak La Nina, when you have a weak La Nina, sub-seasonal factors tend to get a stronghold on the pattern more than the La Nina just dominating it. Last winter, El Nino took care of everything. It just kept a winter away, to be honest, except for 1 week in January, right? Like when the Chiefs were playing at minus 30. So that was it. That was the only cold spell. Well, the forecast from our government, which will be updated next week, looks something like this. That's the previous one, the one they issued last month. They'll update this soon. But do you see the similarities in all of the long-range forecasts for winter on precip? Temperature-wise, this makes a lot of sense to me. If you get out there, very mild most of fall. I still think December turns cold early, but I'll have to give you my supporting evidence for that soon. But December, January, February, we're going to split the country. I think right in through here, that'll last through most of winter. And that's why I think there's better chances of actual cold air intrusions, more frequent than we saw last year, coming into the Northwest, out of the Canadian Prairie, into the Midwest, Great Lakes, Northeast. What is yet to be determined is the state of the North Atlantic Oscillation. Do we get systems that roll through the Ohio Valley out, or do they dig farther into the East Coast and come out? That's all yet to be determined. We cannot make accurate and skillful projections of East Coast storm systems just yet. We can speculate, but not make accurate ones. But from here, why don't we just stretch it out, globally? Oh, sorry. First, I want to show you the precip. Since we're looking specifically at the CFSV2, notice that its precip forecast, January through March, it's very similar to every other model. Now let's stretch it out globally. This is the January, February, March global precip, and I'm mainly showing this to look at a couple of other big areas like Australia and South America. Because notice how wet it is over the Amazon, no strong signal elsewhere. But the NMME was drier here, still wetter over parts of the Amazon, and very wet over Australia. Okay, what about the European model? Notice that it's December, January, February, into January, February, March. Wet Australia, which is typical of La Nina, but it's got a wet stripe right in through here, which we've looked at. Drier in Argentina, drier in northeast Brazil. And I think that would be a very La Nina look to the forecast as well. And what I mean by that is, let me just zoom in on South America here. What I mean by that is you would expect rainfall just to continue in this area and probably not let go, keeping the crop greener longer, meaning that we're a bit delayed in planting here. We'll get new stats this afternoon, by the way, but we're a bit delayed in planting. This might just carry much farther into January and February, preventing an early harvest. That could just stretch out the crop season, delay the planting of safrina, while we continue to worry about drought risk into Argentina once we get into midsummer. So we'll watch for that. Right now, this is not the case. We've got plenty of cloud cover. monsoonal type storms that popped yesterday. So remember, we watched this all week. The latest forecast for the remainder of these next 10 days is still very wet throughout key growing areas in Brazil. There's probably going to be aggressive planting strategy based upon this. A lot of storms in Argentina now. So what I'm saying is spring rains in Argentina could lead to summer drought if the La Niña takes over. And the latest on the this is the 30-day outlook, which goes from the 26th of October to the 25th of November, still shows a very wet corridor throughout Brazil, Paraguay, drier northeast, I'm talking about here, and drier potentially in parts of Argentina. So that's it. That's what we're watching. And I'll just let these ideas kind of just percolate over the weekend and keep working on this subseasonal stuff. I really would like to make some strong inroads into that this fall. And get you better information at that subseasonal level. That would be that's my project. I'm working on that hard so that I have by next year really useful tools to do better job at this subseasonal. That's what I'm most interested in. So listen, you guys take care. I will talk to you next week. Take a look at agweather.com all weekend if you want to see how the models change, and it's there for you. Service we provide. Have a good one. Thanks.